We got to start getting to that space. And here's the space, right? Here's the space, right? Here's the space, right? Right? You got health sciences, right? Health is really a measure of function, right? How well your body functions. When you're dealing with spirit, spirit is the world of energy, right? Spirit is the world of energy, and we break that down to different forces, right? So health sciences talks about how well the body is functioning, right? Health sciences versus spirit or spirituality, just the ituality, just imagine the ituality part is there. Spirituality, the uality. Let me see if I can squeeze in the uality, right? Yeah. Right? The spirituality, right? That is the world of energy, right? That is the world of energy, right? And we break energy down to particular forces, right? So the way modern science does spirituality, right? Because people are now coming slowly but surely to the conclusion that modern science is a religion in and of itself. They still behind the learning curve. They're about to get there though. They just coming slower. They coming slower. We just ahead of the learning curve. We way ahead of the learning curve. But we ahead of the learning curve. So right now it has like a negative connotation to it. It's disrespectful when you say, science is a religion, right? It's disrespectful. The reason why science is becoming a religion is not because it's corrupt. There's corruption everywhere. There's corruption in spirituality. There's corruption in the church, in the mosque, in the synagogue, in the anywhere where you have, there's corruptions everywhere. But the reason why science is becoming more and more and more like a religion is because people are getting more transparency with science. You see, science benefited for a long time the same way the church did. Nobody was allowed to read the Bible. Nobody was allowed to read the books. Nobody was allowed to do the knowledge on the history. So it just go off what I say, blind following the blind, right? Or the one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind kind of thing, right? Science kind of benefited that way. You had great masses of people, illiterate and ignorant, and you got these enlightened folks that's just, this is what it is. Notice that the two phrases Yahweh Tesvaot and Yahweh Elohim are synonyms. One using a feminine plural word, meaning forces. The other a masculine plural word, meaning powers. Also, that Yahweh is not the Tesvaot, but a part of it. Yahweh is a part of the forces. Hence the usual translation of Lord of Hosts. Yeah. In the same manner, Yahweh is not the Elohim, but a part of it. A part of the powers. But notice that while the translators will consistently use Lord of Hosts for Yahweh Tesvaot, they never use Lord of Powers for the phrase Yahweh Elohim. You will never ever see that. You're never going to see that. What I just showed you, you're never going to see that anywhere for public consumption, but I guess here, because we went to the rabbis, we went to the Hebrew websites, we went to the Blue Letter Bible, which is like the new authority of all authority for Christians and Israelites and Catholics. But if we're talking about the heavenly bodies and the earthly forces, no one number symbolizes that more than this one does. This should make it plain for you, like super plain, right? Because this number represents that whole unification. If there's a unification, this might be it right here. This number right here might be the grand unification theory of all forces right here. 7.365, right? Because we have what? We have the days in a week, and we have the days in a year, right? But this is your blood pH. This is your blood pH. Your blood pH just so happens to be, when you're healthy, when your blood is healthy, 7.365. That's what a healthy pH is supposed to be. Now, you could be a little bit under that, you could be a little bit over that. But you get too high over that and you're going into alkalosis. You go too high or too far under that, you're going into acidosis. So this is the perfect space for homeostasis right here. This is the perfect pH, 7.365. This is what my ot looks like in your blood. 7 is neutral. 7 is neutral. 7 is neutral, right? Just above 7 means that it's very slightly into the alkaline space. But technically, you don't really get into the alkaline space till you get from 8 until 14, right? On a pH scale, from 8 to 14 is considered alkaline. From 1 to 6 is considered acid. 7, neutral. Ma'at, Switzerland, right? Balance. 7.365 is where your blood is supposed to be. Just so happens that there's 7 days in a week and 365 days in a year. Heavenly bodies exerting the forces, right? Heavenly bodies, the sun, and the other planets, mind you. They're all a part of why we have 7 days in a week and 365 days in a year. They're all a part of that. Right? The sun is the major conductor to the orchestra, but all of the heavenly bodies are playing a role in this, right? But it just so happens to be your blood pH. Now, what is your blood pH consisting of internally? Well, most people, because we listen to either Dr. Sebi or another health guru, we believe that food is the thing that's most impinging, the strongest determining factor of your blood pH. It is not. It is not. It's not food. The strongest determining factor of your blood pH is gas. This is the strongest determining factor. The primary gases, right? Oxygen, CO2, carbon dioxide, and then we're going to throw nitrogen up in there. Right? There ain't no nitrogen in it. Yes, it is. You got nitric oxide, right? These are the biggest players when it comes to your pH. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitric oxide. And then behind these guys is still not food. Behind these guys is still not food. Behind these guys is muscle activity. This is number one. And number two is going to be muscle activity. Because muscle activity is going to determine food. So muscle activity is going to be higher on the food, up the food chain than food. So it's going to be gases and then it's muscle. And these two are more primarily related. The muscle activity is determining the food activity. In a healthy body. In an unhealthy body, the food activity determines the muscle activity, and that's where disease comes in. Your environment right here, where you live at, in a place where you got more cars than trees and grass, you got more greens than you got more greenhouse emissions than actual greens, right? The number 26 tells us how many protons, how many neutrons, how many electrons there are associated with iron, right? It's the density of subatomic particles and their forces that makes up iron. So that's where the number 26 is. It's not an arbitrary number. They didn't just, like throw out the periodic table, all of the elements on the table, and then they just start doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's not how it goes. It's the forces and the powers associated with each atom that distinguishes its atomic number, its weight, etc., etc., etc. Right? Notice that even atoms have human-like qualities, right? Okay. Now, could we be alive without this? No, because this is the most important thing in your blood. So, no atom right? I mean, no iron, then we don't get to have this, the 7.365. Because the iron has magnetic force, and the magnetic force okay. What is going on? All right, so I'm trying to I'm over here trying to figure out shout out to everybody. Right? Listen, so I'm trying to figure out how to get this conversation going.
About 10 vaccines in our generation. To these kids, received 24. My son, born in 1991, has a slight form of autism called Asperger's. But it seems, and again, when I was practicing law, and also when I was in Congress, parents would constantly come to me, and they'd bring me videotapes of their children, and they were all around the age of my son or younger. The generation, something happened in 1989. Exactly. The generation, what happened was...
Can y'all hear this volume? Can y'all hear this conversation?
The vaccine schedule was increased. We went up from receiving about 10 vaccines in our generation to these kids received 24 vaccines. And they all had this thimerosal and this mercury. And nobody bothered to do an analysis of what the cumulative impact of all that mercury was doing to kids. As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe. A child on his first day that he's born is injected with a hepatitis B shot. Under EPA guidelines, he would have to...
All right, so that's the old...
275 pounds to safely absorb that shot.
Okay, so that's the old conversation. I can't stop this thing from doing it.
What happened was that...
Okay, there we go. All right, so...
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a politician in political office, so I don't see much of that.
Do you have concerns about the level of Israeli influence in our politics here?
Okay, not interested in that. Hold on.
This is an individual tragedy as well.
I don't agree with that, but okay. Do you have concerns about...
Hold on.
I'm going to go over some of the key numbers from the ADDM report. Overall, the autism is increasing in prevalence at an alarming rate. The study tests 8-year-olds who were born in 2014. And by the way, these studies are 2 years later than they should be. And one of the things that we're going to do as we move this function to the Administration for a Healthy America, to the chronic disease, the new chronic disease division, is we are going to have updated real-time data so that people can look at this, so Americans can understand what is happening with chronic disease in this country in real time, and not have to wait 2 years to react. We don't wait 2 years to react to a measles epidemic, and we should not, or any kind of infectious disease. We shouldn't have to do that for diabetes or autism. The ASD prevalence rate in 8-year-olds is now 1 in 31. Shocking. There's an extreme risk for boys. Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20. And as high in California, which has the best data collection. So it probably also reflects the national trend, 1 in 12.5 boys. This is part of an unrelenting upward trend. The prevalence 2 years ago was 1 in 36. Since the first ADDM report in 1990, which was 1992 births, autism has increased by a factor of 4.8. That's 480%, I believe. The first ADDM survey was 22 years ago, when prevalence was 1 in 150 children. In all the core states, the trend is consistently upward, and most cases now are severe. So about 25% of the kids who are diagnosed with autism are nonverbal, non-toilet trained, and have other stereotypical features, head banging, tactile and light sensitivities, stimming, toe walking, etc. One of the things that I think that we need to move away from today is this ideology that the autism diagnosis, that the autism prevalence increases, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better recognition, or changing diagnostic criteria. If you look at table 3 of the ADDM report, it's clear that the rates are real, that they are increasing in the last 10 years, which is the beginning with the first one. Year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase.
Okay, so let me just add some clarity here, right? I'm gonna unpause it and then we can go back into it, right? It's only a few more minutes. It's about 10 minutes. It's about a 10-minute clip, right? So the first clip that I played is RFK back in the day. Well, I ain't gonna say back in the day, but some time ago when he was, talking about going on a presidential campaign and blah, 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 that didn't, that wound up not, fizzling out. Even though I would look back on that and call it a success because, with anything, progress is progress. What? Wow, that's crazy. That is crazy. That was wild right there. My Twitter app decided to update itself. Let me see if I can find that clip again. That's crazy. Okay, here you go. I think this is it.
I'm going to go over.
Yeah, this is it.
Some of the.
Okay, so one of his controversial stances, obviously, that led him, to stand out and obviously get to the point he is today, was his conversation surrounding autism. And it very polarizing, to say the least, right? People who were against what he was saying was like, super anti-RFK, and then people who were pro, so he kind of stood in the middle and created a huge dichotomy amongst even the people who considered themselves to be health conscious, right? Because autism is a serious crisis. And with a lot of things, people take this for a joke until it happens to them, right? I have a nephew and a niece that are severely autistic, right? So I understand the impact that it has on a family, right? I also understand the impact that it has on the world, because right now the world is we're having a global problem with our fertility rates and birth rates and death rates. Like right now, we need to have more babies. The problem is, as we have more babies, the babies aren't healthy, right? The babies aren't healthy. And in America, we rank amongst the most dangerous countries in the world to have a baby in, right? So these are very, very, very serious conversations. If we're studying health, if we're studying naturopathy, the most natural act is reproduction. And we're clearly having a problem with it. From, before the pandemic, there was a nationwide baby formula shortage. And I'm saying to myself, how could it be a nationwide baby formula shortage when baby formula comes from breasts? What is wrong with people? You thinking baby formula comes from the supermarket? No, baby formula comes from breasts. So before we can talk about a shortage at the supermarket, we have to talk about an information shortage. We have to talk about negative programming. We have to talk about what's impacting moms that they're not breastfeeding to the point where, some of them can't breastfeed. Like, it's crazy, right? So we're not realizing all these things that are now impacting the mental health of our babies. Right, of our babies. And so as we talk about the jet pillar, remember the spine and the brain is a unit, white matter, gray matter, right? So this is absolutely a part of that conversation. And just, I got so many people hit me up on the Patreon like, yo, RFK is at it again. What you think about this? What you think about this? Before I go and start answering people individually, I'm like, yeah, let me just hit the live stream and we can react to, we can have a conversation and maybe, open up a book or two and talk about it. So at this point, new studies, obviously new studies come out every couple of years. Some new studies have come out and, it's worse than, like, so people thought that he was like a fear mongerer back in the days, but the actual statistics have come out and the statistics are worse than he projected. The statistics are worse than he projected, right? So it's a very important conversation.
Three of the ADDM report, it's clear that the rates are real, that they are increasing in the last 10 years, which is the fruit beginning with the first one, year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase. I want it because this epidemic denial has become a feature in the mainstream media, and it's based on an industry canard. And obviously, there are people who don't want us to look at environmental exposures. And so I want to just read you some of a little excerpts from some of the older studies. The baseline for autism in this country was established with the largest epidemiological study in history, a study of all 900,000 children in the state of Wisconsin, children under the age of 12. They found 0.7 children had autism in every 10,000. That's less than 1 in 10,000. Today we're at 1 in 31. That study also confirmed the 4-to-1 male to female ratio. There were at that time just over 60 children in Wisconsin with autism. And today it's around 20,000. In 1987, there was another exhaustive study, a peer-reviewed study in North Dakota, set out to count every child in the state with a pervasive developmental disorder, including autism. That study meticulously combed through every record, every diagnosis, and he even conducted in-person assessments of the entire population of 180,000 children under 18. The autism rate they found was 3.3 per 10,000. So that's in line with the 1 in 10,000 that was found in Wisconsin 17 years earlier. For context, today, the last number of 1 in 36 is 83 times higher. In 1987, out of 1 million, every 1 million kids, 330 were diagnosed with autism. Today, there are 27,777 for every million. If you accept the epidemic deniers narrative, you have to believe that researchers in North Dakota missed 98.8% of the children with autism. That thousands of profoundly disabled children were somehow invisible to doctors, teachers, parents, and even their own study.
Okay, so here's what he's saying. What he's doing is, and I know he's got the voice, you got to work with RFK. He's saying that scientists and doctors are explaining the drastic increase in autism rates by basically saying we have better testing nowadays, right? And this is just from 10, 20, 30 years ago. So what he's saying is the testing cannot be that much better that we missed 98% of the sick children. We missed them. So that's where you have to kind of gauge the conversation, right? Looking at the new data versus the old data, the question is, why is there such an exponential growth over the last few decades in autism? That's what the real crisis is, right? Is it something that's controllable, or is it something in people's genes, right? Is it something controllable? Is it a variable that we aren't accounting for? Remember, probability and statistics, that's what we're talking about. When you go through statistics, you're talking about probabilities. So the question is there a controllable variable, or is this purely up to chance? And if this is purely up to chance, where did people get these genes from that are producing all these autistic children, including thousands of children that can't speak or use the bathroom by themselves? So an adult has to be with them, a caretaker has to be with these children, even through advanced aging, to take them to poop, wipe their butt. You understand what I'm saying? So, and I know that's graphic details on Easter weekend, but I'm saying that so that you have the clarity, right? Because if you don't understand testing for autism and, you don't know how that stuff works and all that, it kind of doesn't really, the statistics may not translate. It just may sound like a controversial viral clip. But to make it plain for you, he's saying that we missed thousands of children that cannot use the bathroom for themselves at advanced ages. So basically what he's saying is it was not possible to have missed these children, because by the time you get 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, and you cannot use the bathroom by yourself, it's like it's not, you can't talk or use the bathroom by yourself. It's not possible to miss these children, right? They can't blend in with the rest of the children and you just go, oh man, maybe we missed it. So these are not, when you talk about autism, you speak of a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum. There's a scale from the worst cases, which are children that can't use the bathroom or talk, up to the best cases where you have children that you really may not even recognize as autistic. They just may need an extra little help with their homework or extra help, socializing and you know, just a little, they might just need just a little help, right? And then you have a full spectrum of cases in between, right? He's saying basically forget about all those in-betweens and the high functioning children. It is impossible to miss children that get 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and they cannot talk or use the bathroom alone. Like, that's just not possible to have missed them. That's what he's trying to say, because the doctors and the scientists that are against what he's saying, and there's some that are on his side. He's not alone. But the arguments from the other side are basically saying, well, we have better testing now. And he's like, no, there's no such thing as better testing. Nobody needs to test. You don't need a degree. If your child is 10 years old, 12 years old, and they can't talk or use the bathroom, then you don't need a test for that. You know something is wrong. Everything may be wrong, as far as a parent is concerned. You get any little thing wrong with your children, you panic. If you don't have children, let me tell you, any little thing goes wrong, you panic, right? You panic when the children are not around and you don't know what they're up to, right? So any little thing goes wrong, you panicking. So that's what he's basically saying, and that's why he's catching the flack, because I guess maybe it's not translating well. Because to me, that's a no-brainer. That's right over the plate. Now the implications, you can argue implications. You can debate implications of what he's saying, but you cannot debate the facts of what he's saying. It's not possible to miss these children, period. If they can't talk or use the bathroom by the time they're supposed to be in the 5th or 6th grade, what are we talking about? You see what I'm saying?
The same researchers who followed the original cohort for 12 years to double check their number, they went back in 2000 and found that they had missed exactly one child. So doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases. The epidemic is real. Between 1959 and 1965, researchers from 14 hospitals associated with major universities undertook a national collaborative perinatal project tracking 30,000 children from birth to age 8. This was no half-baked survey-based analysis. The study conducted 9 separate screenings covering neurology, psychology, speech, language, hearing, and visual function. Every developmental quirk, anomaly, and disorder was logged with painstaking detail. Autism, a condition characterized by profound impairments in social communication and behavior, would have stood out like a neon sign. There were 14 cases. That's 4.7 per 10,000. So we know what the historic numbers are. And we know what the numbers are today. And it's time for everybody to stop attributing this to this ideology of epidemic denial. In 2009, the California state legislature charged the Mind Institute at UC Davis with because this myth was already becoming pervasive, the myth of epidemic denial was already becoming pervasive in the mainstream media. The California legislature directed the Mind Institute at UC Davis to answer the question. And Irva Hertz-Pichotto is a highly esteemed, revered scientist, neurology, and epidemiologist, came back with a definitive answer: the epidemic is real. Only a very, very small portion of it can be changed to can be charged to better recognition or better diagnostic criteria. I want to say a couple of other things. There are many, many other studies that affirm this. And
it took me 30 years to learn how to properly walk.
Okay, so as far back as 2009, so we're talking about 16 years. We're talking about 16 years worth of studies saying that this is a epidemic. Now, what does that mean? What does epidemic mean? Right? What does epidemic mean? Right? What does epidemic mean? All right, let's welcome Daniel Price to the discussion. Let's welcome Daniel Price to the discussion, right? It's good to have somebody who's from the other opinion. So on a technicality, let's just kind of go through these a few pieces here. All right, so the first thing I would disagree with, Daniel, the first thing I would disagree with is that you're saying what he's saying is based solely on Andrew Wakefield. I think when we went through the conversation just now, he pointed to more data, right? He pointed out more data. So I think we can dismiss that claim about Andrew Wakefield, right? I think we can dismiss that. Making inaccurate generalizations about autism, blanketing, acting like everyone is on the severe end of the spectrum and there is no full-on autism. Autism is autism. He's a quack. Okay, so let's address this. And I thought I kind of explained it just now, but I'll double back for you. So that's actually not what he's saying. And I know sometimes when we get passionate about something, and I could tell you passionate because you have really large messages in the chat back to back to back, and it's cool. I appreciate it. We need more passionate people around the subject, right? Whether we agree or disagree with each other, that's how we find a way forward. Is we get some passion, we get people that care, right? And then we start clashing. We start clashing, and as we start to clash, we'll bring out some research and some ideas and push the conversation forward, right? And hopefully we get some, we can change some of these numbers going forward, right? So we're going to look at some research though. So we got a bunch of stuff to look at, right? And we're not going to be just looking at Andrew Wakefield. I promise you that. I can guarantee you that, right? But here's what I think you're confusing, right? And I guess the name calling, he's a quack or whatever, I guess the name calling is a part of your passion. So I'm going to just charge that to the game, right? But here, we try to keep the conversation more upstairs, more intelligent. Like just, you know, I want you to try to stick more to your points as opposed to getting so passionate. You know, you got to call an old man a quack, right? He's not making blanket statements. So let me just totally, you know, like redirect that energy. He's not making blanket statements. He's not saying that everybody that's diagnosed with autism has a severe case of autism, right? And I know a lot of this is attributed to the fact that he can't really articulate well because of his voice and his age. And so I get it, right? But he's not making a blanket statement. I just want to repeat that, saying that everybody diagnosed with autism has severe autism, that they can't use the bathroom or talk or whatever the case may be. That's not what he's saying. What he's doing is refuting the claim, right? Because there's a claim saying that all of these children that are now autistic, where they're saying like there's 1 in 12 boys in California, what they're saying is that there's always been 1 in 12 boys in California that have been autistic. There's no rise in the autism numbers, or rather there's no rise in the autism cases amongst the population. It's just the fact that we have more up-to-date methods of checking children. And so we're having more people diagnosed where most of the people were being undiagnosed before, right? And so because there's so many passionate people such as yourself that are contentious and debating him, he's not the scientist doing the research. He's reading the research, but people are debating him, right? What he's doing is refuting that with common sense, right? Common sense, easy logic, layman's terms, right? In case you don't understand what I'm saying. And so what he's saying is, yes, for John Q. Public that doesn't know any better, for John Q. Public that's not, you know, a PhD or a medical doctor or somebody who is certified at XYZ, right? You may be confused because you may not understand what the testing procedures were 20 or 30 years ago versus where the improvements in the testing procedures are today. So because you don't understand the difference in the testing procedures, again, you would be at the mercy of credentials. You would have to just strictly trust credentials and go, oh, okay, well, this is what, you know, whoever, this is what XYZ is saying, so I have no choice but to believe that. What he's saying is that is not inaccurate. If we dismiss all of the cases of people who are not severely autistic, and we just look at the numbers of the people who are severely autistic, there are too many people that are severely autistic to say that the difference in the numbers that we're seeing today versus 20 or 30 years ago is strictly based on poor quality of diagnosis. Because these children that are severely autistic do not require complicated diagnoses because they can't use the bathroom by themselves. They can't speak. So you don't need, there's no level of improved diagnosis that would have missed these children. So that's what he's doing. He's not dismissing the children that are not severely autistic or trying to say that everyone who's autistic is severely autistic. What he's saying is, if we exclude everybody, these are people that John Q. Public The person eating McDonald's, smoking a cigarette, like that dropped out of high school. Like this, you don't need complicated anything to. Okay, thank you. You don't need complicated technology to know that to be able to have some idea what's going on.
Myron!
Dude, I can't stand.
Myron!
What?
What are you doing? What you doing?
What you talking about? What am I doing?
You reading them nasty books again, right, Myron?
Everybody read no nasty books, man. You scared the hell out of me. What you talking about, man? Well, I ain't did that in about 2 weeks. What
You
talking
called yesterday too. What you reading? What you reading?
You scared the goddamn book, man. Dr. EnQi. I went on Amazon and got 3 Dr. EnQi books because I'm reading about melatonin and biochemistry. Biochemistry.
What is, Myron, that's not even a, first of all, it's not melatonin and whatever it is that you just said. It's melanin and biochemistry. You can't even pronounce the word, so how you reading? How you reading, Myron?
I'm not looking at the pictures. I got the books right here. I'm looking at the pictures. You know, it ain't no.
All right. So all right. So I had a little, little family moment real quick. So back to what I was saying. So he's not trying to throw out a blanket assumption or assertion and say that everybody with autism is severely autistic, right? I just want to make that plain, right? What he's saying is that we cannot say that all these new cases of autism is strictly due to better diagnosis, because anybody could see that something is wrong with these children, period. Okay. So that was the long way around that one. What we got next? He's got to stop using that word. So does everyone else. It's not an epidemic. An epidemic is a disease. Epidemic. So epidemic is not necessarily a disease. So you are also incorrect there. You are also incorrect there, brother. Right? Love the discourse, love the passion, but that's an easy one. That is, you're also incorrect there, right? So most times when epidemic is used, it's used for an infectious disease, right? So I get it, right? I get it. We can look that up. That's like, yeah, most times. But this is English. In the English language, unfortunately, right? Unfortunately, our top, our most used words have anywhere from 3 to 10 different definitions. Most of them share context, you know what I'm saying? But some of them get far out, right? And so with epidemic, sure, the main usage and the main definition of epidemic does have to do with infectious disease or disease, right? But you have other definitions of epidemic, which simply means a widespread phenomena, period. A widespread phenomena in a specific group or community. So in that context, he's absolutely using epidemic in the correct sense. This is not like a Joe Biden speech. He's absolutely using it in the correct context. He's not saying that autism is an infectious disease. What he's saying is that autism has become a widespread phenomena. That's all he's saying. And if you listen to the greater context of the conversation, that's what he's trying to address. The whole actual debate is, why is autism such a widespread phenomena today, where in states like California, you have 1 in 12 boys, right, being diagnosed with some degree of autism, And 20 or 30 years ago, you know, you had 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, whatever the numbers were, right? 1 in 300, whatever the numbers were, right? Whether the numbers were 1 in 300, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 50. Regardless to what those numbers were, right? That's the conversation, right? Why is it that there's such a drastic incline in today? And the drastic incline means that this is a new phenomena. It's a new phenomena that's sweeping through the community, primarily affecting our boys, right? Affects girls too, but primarily affects boys, right? So that's how he's using the term epidemic, just a widespread, wide sweeping phenomena in our children, right? Well, you might know your stuff. You might know your stuff about autism, but you are incorrect on those things so far that we address. Wow, we got to kind of watch the language though, because the language will mess up the. So I'm not trying to delete your comments, but I am deleting the ones that have curses in it. Okay, I get you're responding to him, but don't like you responded to him with more cuss words. People, let's be creative about our chat, right? Let's be creative about the chat. But I definitely 1,000% agree with you, Cape Yorker. Although Daniel it seems like he's educated on the conversation. So this is where Trump derangement comes in, right? There's a thing, Trump derangement, right? I don't know if y'all are familiar with the term, but Trump derangement, you know, is basically made up of people that lose their objectivity when discussing anything related to Trump or anybody related to Trump. And so I have no doubt that Daniel has educated himself, maybe affected by the situation, somebody in his family, maybe a child, aunt, cousin, brother, sister, right? For whatever reason, he's put some time into the subject, right? No problem. He's read up on the subject. But the loss of the objectivity, where you come in with the name calling and the cursing and the long paragraphs, it's like we can see that you losing your objectivity, right? We can see you losing your objectivity, and that's the kind of thing that hinders the growth. You know, it slows down the sharing of information, because what he's doing is not giving people medical advice. What is it? And here's what you need to understand. There's a reason why they publish scientific journals and for the general public, right? Scientific journals are for the consumption of the general public. Now, the general public may concern themselves more with, you know, Drake's lawsuit against UMG, right? Big U is taking down Vlad TV, or you know, whatever that's, you know, whatever that, you know, LeBron and Steph Curry back in the playoffs. So, you know, Kevin Durant got fired from the Suns. Or like, most people are probably concerned with those stories, right? But discussing science, discussing scientific articles, reading scientific journals, forming an opinion about what you read. That's not only like not medical advice. That's what every person should be doing. Like if everybody was doing that, our country wouldn't be at the bottom when it comes to most health profiles. Our country is in the top countries financially and the bottom countries health-wise. Our country is one of the most dangerous countries to have a baby in. Those are the real statistics. And that's due to ignorance. That's due to lack of scientific literacy, not because there's a thing that says if you don't have a medical degree, you can't read a scientific journal. Or if you don't have a medical degree, you can't form an opinion after reading a scientific article. It's because most people just don't do it. Most people just aren't interested until a doctor tells them, hey, you got 6 weeks to live, or you got, 3 months to live, or, your daughter needs a kidney transplant, or your son, will never be able to participate in regular school with other children, like until there's some sort of personal impact, John Q. Public is not interested. That's the problem. That's the problem. The only thing he's doing is he has been so passionate for so long. And trust me, I do not, for the record, agree with everything RFK says. Some of the stuff he says, I don't even do videos reacting to it because it's so, I just don't agree with, yeah. So I just have to say that for the record. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm even going back and forth with you, because listen, he needs the scrutiny, right? Not only does he need the scrutiny, but the office that he's in needs the scrutiny. See, the beauty of RFK being in this position is that because people don't like Trump, they're creating a new dynamic that's going to last after RFK leaves that job. See, before, that job was almost like a dictatorship where nobody could question whoever's in the seat. Whatever they said, the general public just had to obey. Like, this is it. God has spoken. The head of the CDC says, or, that's it. But now, because it's Trump in there and it's RFK is in there, every single thing RFK says is going to be challenged. And I'm loving it, because what that means is after he's no longer in the seat, this idea and concept of challenging every single thing, every public health mandate, is going to stay intact, because the public is going to be used to acting a fool, which is what we're doing now. So as the public becomes accustomed to acting a fool and challenging every public mandate, I think that can only put us in a better place, because it's going to create more transparency, right? It's going to create more transparency, and over time, it's going to create more scientific literacy. It has no choice, because people are going to get passionate. They're going to have these conversations. And then when they realize that some of the things they're saying is wrong, like when you said epidemic only applies to disease, you could just look that up in definitions of, and you'll see like maybe the first two definitions will be infectious disease or disease. And then you'll see any widespread phenomena throughout a community or something to that effect. And you go, oh yeah, well, maybe I was wrong about that, but he did say this. And then you listen back to what he says and you go, oh, okay. Yeah, I get that. Because yeah, maybe he didn't say it like that, but he's still wrong about this, and that. I'm not saying he's not. I'm not saying that he's, but we have to get over this idea that John Q. Public is not supposed to be studying health. We are absolutely supposed to be studying health, having health discussions, health debates, arguments, getting passionate, getting fired up. You know what I'm saying? Trust me, I appreciate the colorful words. It's just YouTube. You know, they might not appreciate the colorful words. So we want to, you know, refrain from the colorful words in the chat. But we got to have the conversation, right? It's just a matter of you got to even say to yourself, beyond your anger and passion at Trump and RFK for whatever your personal feelings are, something's wrong. You know, and it's crazy to me. And let me just add this before I go back to look at what next paragraphs you've typed in, right? What's crazy to me is that people seem to be angrier at somebody in office trying to put attention on this issue so that people can get help, as opposed to having the issue ignored and swept under the table, which is what was going on before RFK got in there. Before RFK got in there, this was quiet. The parents of autistic children, oh, they was making noise. But the general public, you didn't have nobody caring about these discussions. Nobody, they was getting swept under the rug. They're like, yeah, well, what about, you know, what's going on in the Middle East and, you know, Ukraine, you know, whatever. Like, nobody was talking about this. People was much more interested in Hunter Biden's laptop than they were in the fact that our children are mentally, you know, are having an epidemic. It's an epidemic of mentally challenged, mentally crippled, even some children. These are only facts. There was more media coverage, more media conversation, more controversy, more vitriol, more passion about Hunter Biden's laptop than it was about autistic children. And it's crazy that people are angry about RFK bringing it out to the front and trying to get, so here's the other part. As he ramps up the discussion, just so maybe you don't know, but as he ramps up the discussion and the attention, then he's able to go and politic the government to divert more funds to more research for autism. That's how it goes, right? Because there's a set amount of money, right? There's a budget. And so the squeaky wheel is the wheel that gets the oil. The squeaky wheel gets oiled. And so what he's saying is, no. We have to focus on these babies. There's something wrong with our babies and nobody's paying attention. And it's like, you know, people are like, yo, shut up and dribble. Like, yo, you know, go back to, you know, stop talking about this. This is fake. You're a quack. You know, leave them kids, you know, let the parents of these children deal with the burden, you know, let them figure it out on their own. And that's the thing that perplexes me. I'm like, how is it that people are more angry about RFK trying to make this a national issue, a national campaign, something that we can all rally against, right? And look to find the variables. Look to find the variables, even if he's wrong about what he thinks the variable is, right? We all know what he thinks the variable is. Mercury and the shots and the blah, 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 blah. Maybe he's wrong on that. Fine. Once there's more attention on it, more studies on it, his claims will be disproved. And then hopefully they'll find the other variables that's responsible for the spike. That's how it works. More attention, more research, more information. More information, the probability increases that we can start to find out what's going on. right? What's going on? Because the other option is we ignore it and hope that it gets better by itself. Right? And there's two personalities. You know, some people fight and some people are passive. I'm from the Bronx. We fight. If we love something, we fight for it. We fight over it. Right? So I like the fact that he's passionate not only about health, but about children's health. Like, yeah, we got to deal with these babies. A lot has been going on with these children the past 20 or 30 years. The 2000s has been roughest health-wise on the children because they overlooked. Starting with parents that go and buy $12 smoothies and get their child a soda. They go get themselves a $12 smoothie and get their child a can of soda. That's a problem. They're going to get themselves a green salad and get their baby a value, a Happy Meal. That's a problem for me. And just being in the space I'm in, I've been watching that go on forever. And to not offend specific people, I'll address it in general in conversations like this. And hopefully people hear it and be like, oh, wow, yeah, that is me. I've been wilding. I'm one of those people. You coming in the house with green drinks and fresh squeezed juices and all that. And you're giving the children Minute Maid and you're rationalizing it to yourself saying, oh yeah, well, they're not going to eat it anyway. So I ain't even going to waste my money on it. I'm going to get them what they like. They like them little chicken McNuggets. So I'm going to get them some chicken nuggets. Yeah, I'm going to get them some chicken nuggets. And then I'm going to have me a Beyond this, or I'm going to have me a green salad with some massaged avocado and woo. It starts at that level and goes all the way up. Children don't have a job. Children don't have any voices, and children don't know any better. Their minds are focused purely on fun. So again, the squeaky wheel gets oiled, right? As you get older and you start to compete in the world, in the workplace, in sports, whatever the case may be, you start to notice your shortcomings because as we get older and we get out into the world, just by proxy, we are competing with others. So when you live in your own space, how fast you process information doesn't really matter. Once you get in the workspace, and now maybe your job is predicated upon how fast you process information, it becomes a thing. Or maybe you're trying to get grades to go into it becomes a thing. Or maybe you go into sports and athletics or you physical competition. And now your coordination, and you can't get your coordination. And once competition comes in, so anyway, Daniel. Autism has existed all throughout human history. Family, I don't know what it is, bro. You might have Trump derangement. This might just be Trump derangement. We might have to move on from you, brother, because you just making claims, and your claims are correct, but your claims are misplaced. Right? So your claim is correct. Of course, there's been autism forever, right? But nobody's saying that there hasn't been. So you're just introducing that like jumping off the top rope, like WWE. You got two guys in the ring, and then here you just jump off the top rope with a chair or a bell or something out of nowhere. Like you're just introducing a wild variable to the conversation that you're able to rebut with fact. But nobody's making the opposite claim. So when you come in and you say, yeah, there's been autism all throughout history, he doesn't know what he's talking about. The problem is you don't know what you're talking about because he's not saying that there hasn't. I definitely wouldn't agree with that. Back in ancient Egypt, Kemet, right? They used that as a war strategy. They would put the mentally disabled at the front of the battle lines. Yeah, they used them in. So whether we agree with how they handled their mentally disabled or not, right? Back in the Greco-Roman era, they would, they had some other even worse barbaric, so Black culture, white culture, mentally disabled has been around, right? That's not the claim. The claim is, why has there been so much of a drastic increase in the numbers, right? There's a drastic increase in the numbers, and more money, more attention has to be put into this area of research so we can get some more qualified answers by more qualified people. He's not even saying that he's a person to provide the solution. He's just saying that in his job, in his role, he can create some attention, then throw that as an alley-oop to the people with the bag, right? The people with the bag, right? And they can then allocate the money so that the qualified doctors, the qualified neurologists, the qualified psychiatrists, the qualified children therapists, right? Pediatric therapists, right? They can have funding to stop doing what they're doing and solely focus on autism for whatever amount of time so that, we can figure out what's going on. Hey, you know what? That's a pretty good point right there. That's a good point. That metric, if we applied that metric all over the place, we do not see the same drastic increase. And technically, all manner of testing, right? All manner of testing has gotten better. So Dan, you have been I'm sure you got Trump derangement now. Look at this. He said, EnQi, you're incorrect. I know it's hard for you to admit when you're wrong, but go look up the definition of epidemic, dude. What's the first definition that pops up? Autism doesn't fit that. Bro, you are like the master of straw man. And I'm trying to say that it's maybe your thing, whatever you have against them, that you're not like, something's up with you. Yeah, something's up with you. you wildin'. I literally took like 10 to 20 minutes to explain that in the English language, there are multiple definitions. And that while you are correct, the most used version, right, applies to infectious disease. But the other definitions, right, you can't, like, because you need RFK to be wrong to fit your narrative, you can't impose on him the wrong definition and say that's what he was saying. Like, epidemic is a widespread phenomenon, and that's what he's talking about. That's the context of the conversation.
Gotta go walk the dog.
All right. Make sure y'all water the dog first.
All right, he's watering her right now.
All right. Daniel, you wild for the night. You are wild for the night. Shout out to Mike Carter, a new dad in the building, obviously passionate about the subject, speaking with his putting his chest into it with the super chat, right? Putting his chest into it with the super chat. That's what we need. We need like 500 people to send super chats for autism discussion on Easter, right? On Easter weekend, when people are going to be giving their babies. And this is the problem, Daniel. This is the problem with folks like you, right? Specifically, this is my opinion anyway. This is my opinion. The problem with folks like you is you want to be able to dismiss You want to be able to dismiss the air quality. You want to be able to dismiss the water quality. You want to be able to dismiss the amount of synthetic food, synthetic chemicals, the plastic, that like all of these new things that our bodies are exposed to. You want to be able to dismiss all those things, right? And so this is where, the problem comes in with like having like a left wing versus a right wing, right? Because I don't know how long you've been watching me, but I disagree with the health fanatic extremists as well. Like, I disagree with the people that are like, oh my God, it's the air and this and that, and like the Wi-Fi is giving us like. I disagree with like both sides of extremism, right? We cannot ignore the facts. These chemicals and things, that the pollutants and toxins and strange things that our bodies just don't have a context to deal with. There are a lot of new chemicals that are introduced into our environment that our bodies just don't have a historic context for dealing with. Our bodies don't even know how to recognize them as a toxin, a nutrient, like it's just a new thing, right? So as our bodies are exposed to new things, we're going to have new problems. We're going to have worsening of pre-existing problems. Like, that's just a fact, right? Probability, statistics. If we're exposed to this many toxins and anti-nutrients, we'll have this rate of disease and mental illness and blah, blah, blah. It stands to reason that as the rate or the level of consumption of sugars and processed sweeteners and toxins and anti-nutrients goes up, our physical health and our mental health will come down. Now, finding out the specifics, like this right here is causing this, or that takes time and money. But before time and money can be allocated, right, people have to be willing to pay attention. They have to spend time paying attention, right? And you got to be somewhere in the middle. You can't be so riled up and juiced up. Maybe you work in the food industry, or maybe you work in the drug industry, so you protecting your craft, right? You want us to ignore and say, well, maybe there's no environmental, there's no food, there's no chemical, there's no light, synthetic light, there's no external thing, right? The problem is that idea doesn't stand up to reason. And that's where the debate is coming in at, right? Because if these numbers are accurate, which the studies say that they are, not RFK, but the qualified people, the pediatric therapists, the medical doctors, the neurologists, they're saying these are accurate numbers. They're also saying that the numbers from 20, 30 years ago, they may not have been as accurate. They may have had a 1%, 2%, 3%, room for improvement in terms of accuracy. But that small percent of inaccuracies doesn't match the increase that we're seeing in autism. So there actually is an increased rate in autism over X amount of years, last couple decades, So I don't think those things, I don't think we can debate those things. Like, those are the numbers. How we interpret them, what's causing the issue, you know what I'm saying? Like, RFK is a hardline, anti-vax guy. I'm not. Right? As much information as we have, when I was a baby, I was vaccinated. right? Am I a pro super? Yeah, let's bump up the vaccine. We need 1,000. Like, no, I'm not a pro vax, add more vax guy either. I'm somewhere in the middle, right? I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm just saying, hey, everybody, let's just get more educated. Let's care more, right? Let's just love the babies more. Like, let's just care more. Let's get more passionate. Let's get more Daniels, right? Let's get more Daniels that's saying, yeah, well, whatever, challenge the establishment, whatever. I'm saying, let's keep that energy though. After RFK gets out of the seat and he's no longer in the seat, we got to keep that energy. Like, this can't just be Trump derangement. We just going to challenge anything, even actual statistics, just because of the person that's delivering the statistics to us. Because we don't need RFK to deliver the statistics. We can go online and subscribe to scientific journals ourselves. Right? We can do the research ourselves. We can read, those of us that are literate. Right? So, I get it, Daniel. Daniel, you have had the floor for about 90 minutes, brother. Hey, you had the floor for about 90 minutes, family. Yeah, you had the floor for about 90 minutes, man. And I think that we've been fair in trying to, I'm just hoping that other folks that are watching the conversation have got something out of the conversation, and we're going to go into some more. Yeah, we're going to go into some more. Yeah. We got to let Daniel, we got to let Daniel go. Daniel is, wilding. Daniel is wilding. Daniel is still hung up on, and listen, most people know that I'm usually quick on the trigger to like block folks or look something up or whatever, but I wanted the conversation, right? And now that we've had the conversation, before we move on from the conversation, let's just go to Webster's dictionary real quick, so we can finish up this part of the conversation, right? If we go to Webster's dictionary, right? Look at the first definition. Epidemic. If we go to Webster's dictionary, guess what? The first definition isn't even disease. So I know right now when we look at this, we look at Webster's, you get ready to start having a seizure and go into convulsions, and try to relax yourself, Daniel. You need to, you know what? It's prayer time. It's prayer time, Daniel. This, you know what I want you to do? I want you to pray with us, Daniel. We do our little exercise. We give thanks for our health, our heart health, our circulatory system. And we just take 5 minutes to do some basic exercises to get the blood flowing, right? It's also really good for your mental and emotional well-being. So I want to hope that you join us real quick in this little quick prayer, right? I'm hoping that you join us real quick in this prayer. Because it'll be good for your temperament. It'll be good for your temperament if you could join us real quick in this prayer. Yeah. I think that, you know I need a break. Your energy is so wild. I need a break. If you don't need a break, I need a break. Yeah. I definitely need a break. So we're gonna go to prayer. Bam. Okay, here we go. No, that's not the right one. Okay, here's the right one. Right, we got two versions of the prayer on the page. One that is primarily focused on being able to visualize the anatomy, and then one to help folks that don't necessarily know the exercise routine to be able to go ahead and join in with us on the exercising portion. So I just want you to go ahead and participate with us. A loving activity real quick. Some love.
EnQi prayer number 2. We give thanks and praise to the Most High God for the divine spark that set ourselves into perpetual motion. We give thanks for the magnetism of the Most Holy, the magnetism that repels and attracts the ferry boats of light 60,000 miles every 60 seconds throughout our vessels and caves. We give thanks for the ability to drink clean water every 60 minutes, flooding the river of life. We give thanks that sugar has not covered our ferries and turned them into stone. We give thanks that darkness has not covered the riverbanks with calcium and turned them into stone. We give thanks that anger and fear have not turned our almonds bitter, turning our heart to stone. We give thanks for smooth sailing upstream through the valley of death, through the superior vena cava into the right atrium. We give thanks for smooth sailing around the heart through the corona crown, joining the vortex in the right atrium. We give thanks for the perfect black solar repeater that induces the primary electromagnetic wave, opening the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim closes. We give thanks to the ray wave, reflecting on the semi-lunar valves, opening a pathway to the vineyard. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the lunar gate to the vineyard closes. We give thanks to the Most High God that provides the light and our breath, and the light in our breath. We give thanks for the fine olfactory system that makes our grapes ripe with light. We give thanks for the Jed pillar that provides us with a stable fleet of ferry boats to dock in our vineyard. We give thanks for smooth sailing through the pulmonary vein into the storm of the left atrium. We give thanks for the perfect black solar repeater that induces the primary electromagnetic wave, opening the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim closes. We give thanks to the ray wave, reflecting on the semi-lunar valves, opening a pathway into the holy royal arch of the Wa scepter. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the lunar gate into the holy royal arch of the Wa scepter closes. We give thanks for the magnetism of the most holy, the magnetism that repels and attracts the ferry boats of light 60,000 miles every 60 seconds throughout our vessels and our caves. Amen.
Woo! Yo, I played myself. I played myself because I was feeling myself. So listen, I told y'all, you know, I'm working on me, right? When I broke my leg, I gained, you know, listen, this whole health journey started for me primarily because I am a fat boy at heart, right? So any little bit of, any small amount of time where I'm not on top of things, you know, things can go downhill very quickly for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't be left alone with a bag of Oreos, like Pookie in the crack house. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I gained, I'm ashamed of how much weight I gained in going from January to February. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm getting back, you know, I'm getting my thing together. My leg is good and woo. So I just started my jumping rope or whatever the case may be. And yesterday was the first time that I hit like close to 50 push-ups in less than 60 seconds. So for the people that's new to the platform, so our main thing, right, is 60 push-ups in less than 60 seconds, right? For the women, 40 push-ups in less than 60 seconds, right? That's good fitness. That's like a good physical, you know, physical barometer for your health, right? And there's some other benefits and some other stuff, you know, we talk about that all the time, but I was feeling myself, you know what I'm saying, yesterday, because I got close to the 50 piece in 60 seconds. I was like, okay, now I'm about to be back. I'm pumping myself up, I'm gassing myself. So just now, when we go to the prayer, instead of following the protocol, you know, toe raises, heel raises, squats, push-ups, jumping jacks, I just immediately jumped down. Let me bust out these puts. Yeah, I did too much just now. Yo, I did too much. And then I look in the chat and I see my man Daniel just cussing up a storm. I'm like, okay, brother, sorry. I tried to keep you in the loop and enjoy the conversation and the pushback and all that, but I can't allow you to mess up the video while you're going crazy with the insults and the cuss words and, you know, so bam. You know, we wasn't trying to throw a block party for Easter, but you know. And, you know, at some point I go into the YouTube and I release everybody that I blocked. So everybody's not necessarily blocked like forever. But yeah, sorry, bro. Enjoying the conversation, enjoying you, you know, over here scrapping, debunking everybody, right? But you can't do all the cussing. And I know that other platforms, they allow people to do that in their chat, but those are probably platforms where they have enough subs that they don't mind getting their videos blocked or whatever the case may be. We don't have enough people watching our live streams to afford you to be cussing up and down in the chat. Sorry. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I can't afford it. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. Man, my man just made a whole new page and bounced right back. So you might just be trolling then. That's interesting. That's interesting. I don't even know how to do that. How to make another page and come right back in like that fast? That's crazy. It's all right. We'll get you. We'll get you out of there. We'll get you out of there. And now people with the wrenches. Listen. People with the wrenches. Y'all got wrenches for a reason, man. Listen. Y'all got wrenches for a reason. When y'all see people in the chat cussing up a storm, you got to be able to block folks. Yeah, you got to be able to block folks. Wow. Yo. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I try to like leave the room for people to be passionate about the conversation, because I know, like me, you know what I'm saying? Like I can get crazy too and get ahead of myself. Over the years, I've learned how to tone that down. You know what I'm saying? And get out my points without necessarily calling somebody a P word, a B word, or an A word, or, like, because when you do that, it makes it look like you lost the argument, or you didn't, you lost the conversation, or you didn't have information, like you didn't have articulate information. You know what I'm saying? So it hurts your side of the conversation. Yeah, he going crazy. He going crazy. But yeah, if you see it, just block it. Yeah, if you got a wrench, just block it. Because I don't see how it's still coming through. Yeah, block it. Yeah, he going crazy. Yeah, he going crazy. He talking about my kids. Yo, let me find out this guy works somewhere. He might be an agent for them folks. Oh, man. Yeah. Don't get trapped in there, and then you start adding more cuss words to the video. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You gotta. Because once you see that people are like, so once you see people getting blocked, and then they coming back with the exact same name after getting blocked, like I'm not timing out. I'm blocking. I'm permanently blocking. So if you see you block somebody with a permanent block and they come back into the chat with the same name, that's a troll, right? That's a troll. That's now we done passed boundaries of actually having a conversation. That's just somebody trying to mess up the platform, mess up the channel, mess up the video. Like that's somebody trolling us, right? Because other than that, how you making brand new YouTube accounts back to back? You're not sitting there that passionate. You're not that impacted by this live stream that you're making like 5 and 10 new YouTube accounts to continue to use profanity in the chat for any other reason. right? That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of work. Yeah. We don't got the energy for that. We don't got the energy for that. Yeah, we gotta tap out and let Daniel win. All right. Yeah, man. It just, but we know we working, right? We know we working when that starts to happen. When that starts to happen, we know we working. Because now you starting to look like you're making a living over here. Like you're paid to distract. You're paid to disrupt. You're a paid disruptor. And that's crazy. Right? So let's start to tap into some of these conversations. Right? Let's start to tap into some of these other conversations. Right? Let's look at some of these scientific articles. Right? We can't spend the whole day. Right? We can't spend the whole day on this conversation. Right? So let's go here. Okay. All right. So now we're going to pull out the books. Right? Now we're going to pull out the books. Right? So let's go to the autism book. Right? Now we can go to the autism book. Let's go to the autism book. Right? Let's go to the autism book and start to look at some of these articles from the journals. Right? Conditional deletion of hippocampal CA2, CA3A oxytocin receptors impairs the persistence of long-term social recognition memory in mice. Okay, so now we're going to start to talk about potential variables, right? Potential variables that don't have anything to do with the controversy of shots and vaccines and all this other kind of stuff. We're going to talk about controllable variables that could potentially be impacting these children, right? Some of these studies that have already been done, right? That we need to actually bring the attention to. No. You know why? Because I mistook Daniel for somebody that was intelligent, right? I mistook Daniel for maybe a concerned parent or somebody that was intelligent that wanted to really have a conversation. So we would have got into the articles and the facts and the science a long time ago, but a lot of times it's the low-hanging fruit that makes the most impact, right? The low-hanging fruit makes the most impact. So, you know, we got to clarify things like the definition of epidemic, right? Look, we look up the definition of epidemic. The first definition has nothing to do with disease. I think this is what really fired him up and got him to start talking about my kids and making threats and going crazy, right? First definition, the word disease does not appear. Affecting or tending to affect a disproportionately large number of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. So if we look at Webster's dictionary, the first definition absolutely applies correctly to what we're seeing with the numbers of autism. 1 in 12 qualifies with this definition right here as an epidemic, right? Number 2, it doesn't qualify, right? It's not contagious, right? We don't have any evidence to suggest even that it's an infectious disease, right? Characterized by very widespread growth or extent of relating to or constituting an epidemic. So again, the third definition also does not have the word disease in it and absolutely qualifies RFK's conversation in terms of saying autism is at an epidemic level, right? It is a widespread situation. And if we look at the numbers are going up, which indicates widespread growth, right? Now, we look at epidemic as a noun. The first definition is outbreak of disease. So again, right here, you would be correct. This definition, just like the second definition up here as an adjective, do not apply. But if we look at the second definition as a noun, the word disease is not here. It says an outbreak or product of sudden rapid spread, growth, or development. And again, if we look at the numbers, sir, you will see there is rapid growth and development because you will see that the numbers have increased, right? So anyway, right, we get back to work, right? So the first thing I want to point out, right, is this article that talks about oxytocin receptors and the impairment of long-term social recognition memory in mice, right? If you know anything about autism, a lot of autism has to do with the impaired ability to socialize, right? So that is a large part of autistic study, right? The impaired ability to socialize, right? And so because we've spent so much time already in the mud with Daniel, right? I'm just going to highlight some of these articles, right? I'm going to highlight some of these articles and move on, right? Because some of these will pop back up later, right? Some of these will pop back up later, right? So that's one, right? That's one. Here's another that's very important. Right? This is another one, right? Now, again, these are important factors because these play a role in the variables that are the most the most research because they seem to have the most impact on the various aspects of what we know of as autism. Right? What is that popping up on the bottom of my screen? Oh, that's because I'm not on the right screen. My bad. There's a lot of Black people getting autistic. There's a lot of everybody that that's dealing with autism, right? I don't want to take your question out of context, but there's a lot of everybody. There's a lot of everybody that is wrestling with autism, right? There's a lot of everybody. Now, boys are being diagnosed at a higher rate than girls, right? So we can look at it. So if we just do the numbers on it, right? Boys are being diagnosed at a higher rate than girls. And then amongst boys, Black boys are being diagnosed at a higher rate than our counterparts, right? So immediately, if you just look at that, you can look at what differentiates those groups to start your research, right? Because if there's anything that affects girls or women differently than it affects boys or men, the first place you want to look at is obviously hormones, right? Or you can look upstream from hormones to neurochemistry, right? Which is particularly where people go with autism because it's a mental issue, right? So people are trying to find the nexus point between the differences in the brain anatomy, the neurochemistry, and then so this is why you have, neurologists, right? And then you have, psychiatrists and therapists, right? You have neurologists because they're looking at brain chemistry, brain anatomy, right? Differences, small nuances between the brain structure and the actual chemical, cascades in the brain. Then you have psychiatrists and therapists because they're looking at managing behavioral symptoms, right? So the first thing we need, obviously, is better cross communication, right? Better cross communication, which is another thing that comes with more interest, more attention, more conversation, right? All right. So here we have another study on how oxytocin affects the entorhinal cortex and the hippocampus. So two studies so far, right? One on social recognition and oxytocin. The second one on the actual spatial navigation and social behavior affected by the entorhinal cortex and the hippocampus, right? So let's dig in a little bit. Spatial navigation and social behavior are two processes throughout the life of animals and humans. The hippocampal subregions and the medial entorhinal cortex are known as the hub structures for spatial navigation and spatial memory. Locations and territorial boundaries encoded in spatial maps are often social in nature. However, it remains largely unknown how these social locations become encoded in the spatial maps. Oxytocin is the evolutionarily conserved hypothalamic neuropeptide involved in emotional behavior, such as anxiety and fear, as well as complex social behavior. Stop. So, oxytocin which most people, if you've heard of oxytocin before, but I know we got some folks from the back row watching, right? Oxytocin, primarily people know of that as the bonding chemical, right? Oxytocin is the love hormone or the love neuropeptide, right? Bonding, right? That again, right, for the folks all the way in the back, is one of the primary things that needs to be addressed, or that's attempting to be addressed with all of the various different approaches to autism, right? Yo, Daniel got folks on fire. People is texting me. Yo, leave Daniel, man. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. The only thing we're not entitled to is the way we deliver our opinion. That's all. I'm not mad with Daniel. After this live stream is over, I'm not going to think about Daniel. Actually, I might think about Daniel a little bit, right? Shout out to Daniel for the content, right? All right. So without going too crazy, right? We're going to put, now remember, we're in the autism book, right? So we're going to put this on the map, right? So far, we have something to put on the map. We have a variable to put on the map, right? If you don't have the autism book, go to Amazon, get the book. Check out, right? So we're going to put something on the board. Oxytocin, right? The next thing we're going to put on the board is estrogen, right? The studies show that there's a different rate of diagnosis from girls and boys, right? So immediately, whenever you see that, you want to check hormones. You want to look at hormones and see if hormones are having an impact, right? So let's go here, right? And let's go right to the babies. Let's go right to the babies. Right? Let's go right to the babies. And let's look at this, right? Let's look at this. Here's an article here, right? This is released in July of 2019. So this is very new still. In a new study, scientists confirmed that babies who are exposed to higher levels of estrogen while they are in the womb are more likely to be autistic. Stop. So here's a second variable right here. Here's a second variable. Now, I'm just putting these on the board as we're going through articles, right? But here's the thing. You can go further down the rabbit hole and look at lifestyle habits that may increase or decrease oxytocin production. We can look at some lifestyle habits that may increase or decrease, right? So as we look at these variables, you can then take it to the next step and go, okay, well, what can I control? What can I modify? Right? Right? What can I control? What can I modify? Right? Right? And this starts with, for me, right? This starts for me with the conversation of divinity. For me, I go to a God thing, right? That's for me. Everybody doesn't, that's not that's not how their mind works. For me, I'm hardwired to go to a God thing, right? I'm hardwired to say having a baby is supposed to be a sacred thing, right? And if it's a sacred thing, then it's a thing that we should put time into. But the reality is, in our world today, more people spend more time planning to buy a house, planning to buy a car, or planning to get a gold chain, or planning to get an expensive pair of shoes or a dress than they do planning to get pregnant. The only people that are actually spending time and money planning to get pregnant are people who have tried or people who have aged, and for whatever reason, something's not working right. Let me make sure. Okay. Something's not working right. So because something's not working right, now they want to go to a fertility clinic and get examined and fast and diet and take shots and do this and that and the other to try to increase their ability to. But John Q. Public? Nah. Most children that come into the world today is just due to sex. Period. Sex. People having sex with no thought of making a baby. People just having sex. And then the woman says, oh, hey, babe, I missed my cycle. You know, what we gonna do? Or this, you ain't got no, you, or she might go to other, you know, I'm pregnant and you don't have any say in the matter because it's my body. You know, she might be one of them, right? But regardless to what her perspective is on whether it's a group decision or her own decision, right? Nobody really puts any respect on the process. Nobody really is sitting down saying, you know what, babe, let's have a baby. You know, let's fast, let's cleanse, let's exercise, let's cut out the processed food, let's stop drinking and smoking and getting high, and like let's go through a little period where we try to get to our best selves. Right? Let's try to get to our best selves and then let's get pregnant, right? Let's get pregnant because it's a group project, right? Let's get to our best selves so you can have your best eggs ready, you know, your best, you know, everything should be at its, you know, optimum, whatever your genes are, right? Whatever your genes are, we want to have the best choices. When we roll the dice, we want the best ones, you know, the best probabilities to pop up. So I want to have my best sperm. You have your best. Like let's put our foot forward to try to minimize all liability, right, and maximize our best potential. And in 12 months, you know, let's go ahead and you know, let's go for broke. Let's try to make us a baby at that point. We don't do that. We don't do that. We put down payments on jewelry. We put down payments on a house. We put a down payment on this. We save up for that. We plan for this. We plan for that. We plan to go on a vacation to Cancun. You know, we plan to go visit the pyramids once. Oh, I want to go to Spain. We plan to go. People aren't planning to have babies. They're just accidentally popping them out. You know, they were at the nightclub last night, snorting coke, smoking weed, pack a day of cigarettes, and then today, you know, they got nauseous when they had breakfast and went and took a pregnancy test. Oh wow, I'm pregnant. Right? So for me, I just go to that space. So before we even finish going through the variables, the biggest variable to me is care. Is care. Did you just raggedly, haphazardly bring that baby into the world? Or did you say, okay, look, we're going to plan this baby. So let's at least put 3 months. I mean, let's at least put 3 months into a program. Like, let's eat good. Let's get our little water. Let's get hydrated. Let's, you know, whatever you need. Let's make sure we have all that at least for 90 days, 4 months, maybe at least a cycle of blood, for 120 days. Let's try to make sure we clean it up. That's where I start at, right? because this is the most important thing that a human being can do is reproduce. You know what I'm saying? Like, people plan to go to a nightclub. Oh man, Cat Williams coming to town. I can't wait to Cat Williams. I can't wait to Drake performing in my city. I'm gonna get these tickets. Or Kendrick. I can't wait for the next Rihanna concert. Like, people plan for that. Oh man, Coachella. I can't wait to go to Coachella next year. I'm planning on that. People plan to go to the concert. They plan to go to the nightclub. They don't plan to make babies. They just make the baby at the nightclub or at the concert. I'm just saying. That's you know. So I know I'm on a rant. I know I'm on a rant, but okay. Fetal estrogen and autism. Elevated latent prenatal steroidogenic activity has been found in the amniotic fluid of autistic boys. Based on measuring prenatal androgens and other steroid hormones, to date, it is unclear if other prenatal steroids also contribute to autism likelihood. Prenatal estrogens need to be investigated as they play a key role in synaptogenesis and corticogenesis during prenatal development in both males and females. Here we test whether levels of prenatal estrogen, estriol, estradiol, estrone, and oestrone sulfate in amniotic fluid are associated with autism. In the same Danish historic birth cohort in which prenatal androgens were measured using univariate logistic regression, we also made a like-to-like comparison between the prenatal estrogens and androgens. Oestradiol, oestrone, oestriol, and progesterone each relate to autism in an unvariate analysis after correction with false discovery rates. A comparison of standardized odds ratios showed that estradiol, oestrone, and progesterone had the largest effects on autism likelihood. These results, for the first time, showed that prenatal estrogens contribute to autism likelihood, extending the finding of elevated prenatal steroidogenic activity in autism. This likely affects sexual differentiation, brain development, and function. Now, I want y'all to pay close attention, because he was saying something about Andrew Watkins or Andrew Huberman or whoever he was talking about. As we go through these articles here, you'll notice that none of those names or whatever he was talking about none of them people names that he was talking about is in the reference, a part of these studies, right? Okay, let's continue to work. Right now, in the book, we have the much longer version of the article, so you can get the details in terms of how the study was conducted, what the exact levels were. What the exact levels were in studies, etc. Right? Okay. Now, with that being placed on the table, With that being placed on the table, here's a concept. Comedic science, right? Here's a comedic science concept. Food as medicine. Food as medicine. Comedic science concept, right? Back in Kemet, first folks to hybridize foods, right? But that was how they produced medicines. They weren't making like pills and things like that. They were modifying plants to make them more medicinal, right? So with the science pointing here, right? Not as the only cause, not even as a cause, but as a influential variable, right? All of the estrogens, right? Estrone, estradiol, progesterone, right? Precursor, right? Point to autism likelihood, right? So you want to be able to address this and take this off the table, right? You want to be able to address this and take this off the table. If you're a new parent or you're about to become a parent, you want to manage this, right? Okay. So let's see what the studies are saying, right? Let's stick with the studies, right? Let's see what the studies are saying. Let's go here. Let's go here, right? Let's see what the studies are saying. Autism spectrum disorder is defined as a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by social communication impairment, delayed development, social function deficit, and repetitive behaviors. The Center for Disease Control reports an increase in ASD diagnosis rates every year. This systematic review evaluated the use of sulforane therapy as a potential treatment option for individuals with ASD. PubMed Central, Natural Medicines, Border Vitals, Google Scholar, and Medline were searched for studies measuring the effects of sulforane on behavior and cognitive function. All 5 clinical trials included in this systematic review showed a significant positive correlation between sulforane use in ASD behavior and cognitive function. The current evidence shows, with minimal side effects observed, sulforane appears to be a safe and effective treatment option for treating ASD. Now, is that me making this up? Is that RFK making this up? Or is this just reading the existing medical data without opinion, without interpretation, right? Right? Autism spectrum disorder is defined as a neurodevelopment. Okay, we went through that in the abstract. Hold on. Okay, here we go, right here. Now, again, we are pulling this cherry-picked research right from the autism book, right? So if you don't have the book and you're interested, right, Amazon, add it to your cart, check out, right? Okay. Sulfurane, for the people that don't know, right? Because I know I threw that on the board and then I walked away from it. Food as medicine. I threw that on the board and walked away from it, but I had my little rant and I said, you know, before having babies or making babies, we need to dedicate a certain amount of time to prepping, right? Food as medicine, right? Sulfurane, isothiocyanate, 4-methylsulfonylbutane is a potent antioxidant. Is one CAM intervention that has been studied in autism spectrum disorder and other comorbidities with positive effects. Sulforaphane is a dietary isothiocyanate that is synthesized from glucosinolate and a precursor found in cruciferous vegetables, such as cauliflower, broccoli, kale, cole crops, cabbage, collards, Brussels sprouts, mustard, and cress. Food as medicine. Not for you. The guy sitting a few rows back behind you. Right? Now let's look at this study here. Again, Greer McGinnis, Yanaso Kim, right? Central Michigan University, right? This is a Central Michigan, this study comes out of Central Michigan University. This has nothing to do with any bias or this is a pure down, straight over the plate, right? Straight over the plate review of the information, the science as presented, right? Since its discovery in 1948, this organosulfur compound has been frequently studied and has exhibited multiple biological effects, including antioxidant, antimicrobial, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, neuroprotective, anti-diabetic. Several autism spectrum disorder associated basic physiological pathways that sulforaphane directly impacts are regulation of redox metabolism and oxidative stress. Okay, so let's just take our time with that, since we got a couple new folks that's watching, right? I'll put it up there and take it down just so we know what that is, right? When you get into the chemistry, acid alkaline, right? That's where you're going to get these terms. Reduction, right, is the re or re, right? And then the dox part, or the ox part rather, right? The ox is going to be oxidative, right? Oxidative. Right? So this is where you kind of get into the technical side of the acid alkaline, because over here we have something that's a proton donator or an electron acceptor, or on this side you have the opposite, which is an electron donator or a proton acceptor, right? So when you donate protons, rather when you donate electrons, right? When you add electricity, to simplify, when you add electricity, which we discuss as life force, when you're adding life force, warmth, right? Love, negative ions, right? All of those euphemisms. When you add electrons, you're reducing. That's reduction. When you take them away or you add protons, that's oxidation. The term grouped together as redox. So redox metabolism pops up in a lot of conversations, right? So just so as we moving through, we understand what we're looking at. All right. Redox metabolism and oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, which would pop up in a lot of places as redox problems, right? Immune dysregulation or neuroinflammation, which is kind of redundant. Febrile illness and heat shock response, as well as synaptic dysfunction, right? So now, febrile is overheating, body temperature, right? That's so just in case, right? Febrile is overheating, body temperature, fever, typically associated with infections, right? But in a dysregulated state, your body can read cytokines or inflammation or inflammatory markers mistakenly as an infection, and you get a fever. You shouldn't have a fever, right? But the other part, the synaptic dysfunction or dysregulation, right? There's a lot of research, and we're not even going to go into it, but there's a lot of research in excitotoxins and artificial colors and things like that in terms of synaptic dysfunction and regulation, right? Especially with overexciting, right? So just for the folks in the back, the synapse is the gap between neurons. That's how neurons communicate, right? Synapse. Now, a very close link between synapse function and, food consumption is GABA, right? Because GABA is produced along with insulin. GABA is a neurotransmitter, but it's also produced along with insulin, right? And obviously the reason is because the brain consumes so much of the body's sugar, right? So there are controllables, there are variables, things that we can address, right? Not to say that these things are all the cause, not to say that if we address these things is going to eliminate the issue, right? Not to say if we go live in a cave with no TV, radio, and no waffles and pancakes, and like all of a sudden mental illness and autism and everything else will disappear. No, right? But there are some things that we have to address that is causing this increase, right? There's something we have to address that we're clearly not addressing. Something's escaping us, right? And we should be worried, right? We should be worried. It's our babies, right? Okay. All right, so you can go in more detail here. Right? You can go in more detail here. We spend a lot of time wrestling with our good brother Daniel. So we're gonna move on, right? But I just wanted to go through a lot of the articles that speak exactly to the contrary of what Oh man, yeah, we got to talk about this. Oh, we got to talk about this. Okay, we got to talk about this, right? I'm skipping through so much stuff, right? We got to talk about this, right? Look at this. We got to talk about this, right? We got to talk about this. Now, hold on. Before we talk about this, let's just go here real quick. Let's just go here real quick and do a little quick just for the people all the way in the back, right? We just got to go here real quick for the people all the way in the back, right? Vasopressin, also antidiuretic hormone, arginine vasopressin or argipressin. Okay, so first sentence, full stop. First sentence, full stop. Do you see the names? Those are all names for the same thing, right? And so the first name that should pop out to you, right? Arginine, right? So the reason it's named arginine, argipressin, like arginine peptide. Once an amino acid, right? Just layman research. Once an amino acid is on the table, you know that you absolutely have a variable on the table that you can wrestle with. You absolutely have a. So that's why before we even looked at the research, I'm like, wait a minute. Before we even go to the research, let's make sure everybody just has a idea of what vasopressin is, right? So human vasopressin, also called antidiuretic hormone, also called arginine vasopressin or argipressin, is a hormone synthesized from the AVP gene as a peptide prohormone in neurons in the hypothalamus, and is converted to AVP, right, or arginine vasopressin. It travels down the axon. Okay. Vasopressin induces differentiation of stem cells and cardiomyocytes and promotes heart muscle homeostasis. Right? I wanted to put that on the table first. Right? Let's put that on the table first because people talk about it in terms of bodily fluids and pituitary this and that and the other. And for me, this is the first thing that needs to be put on the table, right? The first thing that needs to be put on the table, the development of your heart, right? The development of your heart, right? So let's put that on the table, right? Then we can double back and go to arginine vasopressin may be released directly into the brain from the hypothalamus and play an important role in social behavior, sexual motivation, pair bonding, and maternal responses to stress. Okay, so obviously this is going to be a primary area of research for the obvious reasons: social behavior and pair bonding, right? Okay. Vasopressin regulates tonicity of bodily fluids. It is released from the posterior pituitary in response to hypertonicity and causes the kidneys to reabsorb solute-free water and return it to circulation from the tubules of the nephron. Okay, got it. So vasopressin regulates the kidneys, right? Vasopressin also may have a variety of neurological effects on the brain. Okay. A very similar substance, lysine vasopressin or lipressin has the same function in pigs, and its synthetic version was used in human AVP deficiency, although it has been largely replaced by desmopressin. You got to pay attention. Right? Okay, hold on. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, hold on. We might be missing a lot here. Sodium reabsorption. Okay, bang. Vasopressin released within the brain may have several actions. Vasopressin is released into the brain in the circadian rhythm by neurons of the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Vasopressin released from the posterior pituitary is associated with nausea. Recent evidence suggests that vasopressin may have analgesic effects, right? It's not just pain, but it's also inflammation, just for folks in the back, right? Okay. Now, here's what I want to look at right here, right? Because this is going to make sense. This is going to make sense when we go over here, right? When we come over here, this part right here is going to make sense, right? Many factors influence the secretion of vasopressin. Okay, so many factors means more than just the highlighted. These are just the most impactful, right? Okay. Ethanol reduces the calcium-dependent secretion of AVP by blocking voltage-gated calcium channels in neurohypophyseal nerve terminals in rats. Okay, what does that mean for our conversation? What that means for our conversation, the RFK conversation, the cuss EnQi out Daniel conversation, right? Alcohol consumption. Alcohol consumption. That's something we absolutely have control over. We absolutely have control over how much alcohol we consume. Wine, beer, liquor, alcohol consumption. We absolutely have control over that. And what percentage of women, what percentage of men decide, baby, listen, it's 2025, we're going to have a baby, you know, let's wait 6 months, let's stop drinking, let's stop smoking, like, let's make sure we clean it up all the way for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months before we pop out a baby. Before we even attempt to get pregnant. Like, this is what I'm talking about. So this is where my conversation may differ from whatever RFK is saying. I just agree with his overall premise that there are some variables that we can control for. Right? Here's one. Alcohol. Right? Alcohol. Right? Angiotensin 2 stimulates AVP secretion in keeping with its general pressure and provolumic effects on the bodies. Okay, now, angiotensin 2 might be a little bit more complicated, but it's not. Right? I could just simplify it and say vitamin D. Right? I could just simplify it and say vitamin D, right? Because your vitamin D levels have an impact on your angiotensin and angiotensin 2 levels, right? So your angiotensin 2 level tends to shrink as your levels of vitamin D shrink. So people who are vitamin D deficient usually have problems with angiotensin 2 and maybe some high blood pressure issues or maybe some kidney issues or, you know, things that are impacted in that bag, right? Maybe some parathyroid, some bone, you know, the issue may pop up in a variety of ways, right? But vitamin D absolutely impacts your level of circulating angiotensin 2. That means that this is a controllable variable. If vasopressin levels have anything to do with autism, right? We still haven't looked at what the data says, right? We still haven't looked at what the data says, but if vasopressin has anything to do with these autism rates, angiotensin 2, but guess what? In this country, we are chronically deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D is one of the top nutrient deficiencies in this country. So if vitamin D is a requirement for angiotensin 2 production and we chronically deficient on vitamin D, stands to reason vasopressin levels might not be where they should be at, right? So we just walking through these. I didn't write this article. I'm just walking through it with you, right? Atrial natriuretic peptide, right? This is the counterpart in the renin-angiotensin system, right? Now, cortisol, cortisol, I don't even think I need to go into cortisol because you got 1,000 videos on cortisol and stress management. And so, yeah, right? Everything seems to be able to benefit from reducing stress. Like we don't even have to go into a whole cortisol, you know, neutralizing anabolic hormones and adrenal glands and blah, blah, blah. We wouldn't have to go into that combo, right? Get the stress levels down. This is where things that are considered fringe have a health impact, and people that are hard line left or right wing people may dismiss something like meditation. Right? They'll dismiss meditation as having an actual impact, a solid, like a measurable impact on your health, but it's not direct. Meditation will have a measurable impact on your cortisol levels. Now, your cortisol levels are going to have measurable impacts on fat storage, measurable impacts on heart disease, measurable impacts, right? And now we're looking at another measurable impact on vasopressin. Okay. All right. So now we can go over here and look at what these folks talking about. Vasopressin is a possible treatment option in autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder is rather common, presenting with prevalent early problems in social communication and accompanied by repetitive behavior. As vasopressin was implicated not only in saltwater homeostasis and stress access regulation, but also in social behavior, its role in the development of autism spectrum disorder might be suggested. In this review, we summarize a wide range of problems associated with autism spectrum disorder to which vasopressin might contribute, from social skills to communication, motor function problems, autonomous nervous system alterations, as well as sleep disturbances and altered sensory information processing. Besides functional connections between vasopressin and ASD, we draw attention to the anatomical background, highlighting several brain areas, including the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, medial preoptic area, lateral septum, bed of nucleus of striatus terminalis, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the olfactory bulb, and the cerebellum, right? Now, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, right? These are hot spots. Amygdala, fear, anxiety, hot spots, right? Just in case you know, for the folks all the way in the back. All right, let's stroll down and see what they're saying. Let's stroll down and see what they're saying. All right, let's just stroll down and see what they're saying. What are they saying? They done ran some tests. Right? So let's scroll down. Man, it's a lot of information. Okay. Vasopressin as a social hormone with a ubiquitous role might influence the development of autism spectrum disorder symptoms at several points. Although we might even suppose a causative role of vasopressin, at present, only a symptomatic treatment can be assumed. Let's stop right there for a second, because we skipped through a lot of the data. Go through the book, read the book, Autism book, Dr. EnQi, Amazon, add it to your cart, check out, right? Or do your own research, go crazy, right? That's why we're sharing this, right? Vasopressin. The data is so conclusive, right? The data is so conclusive. My bad. I was supposed to add this one up here. We got another one, right? Vasopressin. The data is so conclusive with vasopressin, right? That the hypothesis, right, from the findings, the conclusion of the findings is that it's absolutely implicated in symptoms. The hypothesis going forward is it's such a large determining factor, it has such an impact in the symptoms, it may even have a causative role. Meaning, as they're looking at the data, they're saying vasopressin may be the main culprit. So now we have estrogen levels, oxytocin, vasopressin. With these two being absolutely manageable. These two being absolutely manageable. These being absolutely having absolute variables that you can control yourself. Can you eliminate 100% probability? Absolutely not. Can you eliminate 100% possibility? Absolutely not. Can you interpret the data and say, okay, so we got this, let's knock these out. Let's try to eliminate, let's take these off the board. Can we get more awareness out there? How many people know about these issues? How many people know that the various types of estrogen, like how many people know that this is having an impact on the child's development? How many people are ignorant to these terms until they're pregnant? Mom and dad. How many people have never stopped to take any time to learn anything about vasopressin, estrogen, oxytocin until they got pregnant? You see that the ignorance part, that's the problem for me. By the time you're pregnant, it's too late. That's not when it's time to figure this out. That's not when it's time to figure this out. Right? Okay. Although we might even suppose a causative role of vasopressin, at present only a symptomatic treatment can be assumed. The available treatment options might also influence the V-purgic system or vasopressin-ergic system. However, vasopressin or antagonistic administration can also be considered. Controversially, vasopressin itself and V1A antagonists have already been proven to ameliorate several symptoms. So this is going in, obviously, administering vasopressin, right, to children and watching the symptoms disappear. Watching the symptoms disappear. So here's what I'm saying. Preventative, right? An ounce of prevention is maybe worth a pound of cure, right? Maybe, not always, maybe, right? What if we get these issues right in mom and dad before they show up in baby? That's what I'm talking about, right? That's what I'm talking about. Those are the things, those are the variables. That's what I'm talking about putting in place. Once the knowledge is there, the information is there, and we go, oh, wait a minute. So vitamin D, that's not hard to fix. That's not hard. Give up liquor, right? Give up the liquor. 6 months, 12 months, so I can have a healthy baby. Get out in the sun, right? Give me a little vitamin D supplement, get out in the sun. Like, what are we talking about? A month's amount of vitamin D costs the same amount as one night drinking at the bar or one night drinking at the club. Or you go to a restaurant, drinks over dinner. 1 month of vitamin D supplementation costs less than one night of drinking liquor. Right? Just saying. A ticket, 2 tickets to the movies. Tickets is like 20, 30. Yo, going to the movies like $20, $30 a person. Tickets to the movies is more expensive than vitamin D. Especially if you consider the option of just taking your butt outside at lunchtime. Right? I'm just saying. Right? We got to be, you know, we can't really play with this. We can't play with this. If we're going to address it, right? If we're going to address it, all right, should we look at dopamine? Yeah, you might need to just get this book because it's so many different things that we need to look at. That we've already taken a look at, right? And then there are some things that would take us more time and patience than we might have today in terms of the olfactory system, right? So we may have to have a conversation about the olfactory system. I just want to find maybe something else simple that we can wrestle with. All right, that's the genetics. That's the genetics, the genes. Okay, we're not even going to go into that on the live stream. That's just in the book. Okay. Now let's take a look at the locus ceruleus. No, actually, you know what we should do? We might just, let's just search let's just go for some low-hanging fruit real quick. Let's just go for some low-hanging fruit real quick. All right, let's jump out of here. And let's just go here for a second. Right? Let's just go here for a second. Look at this. Not complicated. Not complicated. Vitamin D, autism. Boom. Dove Medical Press. Studies have found that individuals with autism spectrum disorder possess lower levels of vitamin D compared to their typically developing counterparts. We'll just leave that there. Right? We'll just leave that there. Let's jump down here. Vitamin D and autism. What's new? Okay, this is 2017. 2 open label trials found high dose vitamin D improves the core symptoms of autism in about 75% of autistic children. Right? We like this just low hanging fruit right here. This just low hanging fruit. Right? An increasing amount of evidence points to the possibility that gestational and early childhood vitamin D deficiency causes some cases of autism. Some, not all, some. Vitamin D is metabolized into a serosteroid hormone that regulates about 3% of the 26,000 genes in the coding human genome. It is also a neurosteroid that is active in brain development, having effects on cellular proliferation, differentiation, calcium signaling, neurotropic, and neuroprotective actions. It also appears to have an effect on neurotransmission and synaptic plasticity. Children who are destined to become autistic have lower vitamin D levels at 3 months of gestation, at birth, and at age 8 compared to their unaffected siblings. Whoa, let's stop right there for a second. That's 3 months of gestation. So that's in the womb. In the womb, vitamin D deficiency. At birth, vitamin D deficiency. At 8 years old, vitamin D deficiency. What is this, a $30 problem? What is this, a $40 problem? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Are we minimalizing, saying that all autism is vitamin D a cure? Absolutely not. But we're talking about impacting 75% of children's symptoms, right? We're talking about studies showing deficiency at 3 months of gestation and at birth. So that means at 3 months, right, the baby wasn't getting enough vitamin D. What does that mean? That means mom wasn't getting enough vitamin D. Right? See, this is why back in the days, let me tell you, when I was little, even now I still get some compliments, but you know, compliments have slowed down, right? But when I was a child and when I was a young man, one of the things I got complimented on most was my legs, right? Because when I was a child, I had really, really bow legs. And then my pops, he got me them expensive shoes to fix your legs, right? They wanted to break my legs, you know what I'm saying? But you know, we opted for the high vitamin D with the corrective shoes, right? And it worked. My legs straightened out to an extent, right? But I still have, you know, if you look, you'll see, you know. So for me, like, oh, you know, that was a thing like back in the days, like, oh, bow legs, you know, that was like a turn on, you know, like, yeah, bow legs, or she got bow legs, you know. For me, I only saw bow legs as a sign of vitamin D deficiency, right? So years later, when I moved to Philadelphia and I lived in Philadelphia, I noticed like it's like an epidemic of bow legs in Philadelphia. Why? What do you notice in Philadelphia? In Philadelphia, you got a really, really high population of Muslims. So what does that mean? That means in the summertime, people is walking around, especially women. Women are walking around with that full covering on, covering themselves up. They're not getting no sun. They're not getting no sun. So for me, like, I be in EnQi vision. So that's what I see. I just see yo, that's cool. But, you might want to take that off. Allah is not going to be angry with you for taking that off. Yeah, I'll take that. Allah is not going to be angry with you about an outfit. You take that off. Yeah. Allah wants you to make healthy young Muslims, right? If you Allah is going to want you to have healthy young Muslims, strong young Muslims. Like, take that off. Allah wants his young Muslims to have good bones and good heart, good brain, vitamin D. Yeah, take that off. Put that back on, and after you see, this goes back to what I'm saying about prepping for the baby. Deciding you want to have a baby, prioritizing the process, and doing the things necessary to focus on the baby. You worried about being a good Muslim, you need to be worried about being a good mother. The two may conflict, right? Because you already live in Philadelphia, right? Or Detroit or New York. You already live in a northern climate where you only getting UVB sunlight 5 months out of the year. So you don't even have the ability to produce natural vitamin D 7 months out of the year. So for you to wear one of them outfits where your head and face and skin is all covered up for them 5 months, that's insane. Especially if you're a soon-to-be mother or a pregnant woman, right? This is low-hanging fruit. This is low-hanging fruit. This is easy. This is easy work, right? Children who are destined to become autistic have low vitamin D levels at 3 months of gestation, at birth, and at age 8 compared to their unaffected siblings. 2 open label trials found high dose vitamin D improves the core symptoms of autism in about 75% of autistic children. A few of the improvements were remarkable. Vitamin D doses used in these children were 300 IU a day, up to a maximum of 5,000 IU a day. The other study used 150,000 IUs a month, right? As well as 400 IU a day. These 2 open label trials were recently confirmed with randomized controlled trial using 300 IU a day with maximum 5,000 and resulted in effects similar to the open panel studies. In terms of prevention, a recent study showed vitamin D supplementation during pregnancy, 5,000 IUs a day, and during infancy and early childhood, 1,000 IUs a day, significantly reduced the expected incidence of autism in mothers who already had one autistic child from 20% down to 5%. Vitamin D is safe. For example, over the last 15 years, poison control reports there have been approximately 15,000 cases of vitamin D overdose. However, only 3 of these 15,000 people developed clinical toxicity and no one died. No one died. Only 3 people out of 15,000 that had too much had a serious problem. Given those facts, practitioners might consider treating autism with 300 IUs a day and seek to prevent autism by supplementing pregnant and lactating women with 5,000 IUs a day. I mean, what are we talking about here? What are we talking about right here? What are we talking about right here? See, this is where the conversation. So this is where I'm trying to engage folks, but we get folks like that. So for me, I know some people, they'd be turned off by the negativity and the cursing but for me, it's important that y'all see that every so often, because you have to know what the mind. Sometimes we get sometimes we get in these bubbles, right? Where we talk to each other, we vibe, we build, you know, and we get used to being in an echo chamber. We get used to being in an echo chamber where we all reinforce each other's curiosity, creativity, you know, optimistic, you know, we reinforce each other. And most times that's good. But the problem is the rest of the world, like, you know, the real world is, you know, unfortunately, it's more full of people who are functionally illiterate. Most of our society is functioning at a 5th or 6th grade level, which means, respectfully, 60% of our society is functioning at an elementary school level, reading level, right? So this is where those problems come in. Because if you're at an elementary school reading level, chances are, if I was to give you a scientific journal article by a medical doctor or neurologist, you wouldn't be able to read it. Not with any comprehension level. That's, you know, you wouldn't be able to pull anything meaningful from it because you're operating on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade reading level. Now here, we're building a culture of reading, of studying, right? So that's where the patience comes from. Like Paul, like, man, I thought EnQi would have been pulled out the articles and the books and the references and the... No, because I could do that all the time. I could do that anytime. We do that almost every day, right? What we got to do sometime is have the conversation with folks outside the circle and see what we're up against. Because when it's time for legislation to get passed, when it's time to vote, when it's time for budgets to be allocated, there's going to be people on the floor like that. It's going to be more people like Daniel than people who actually have done the studies. Yeah, it's going to be more people like Daniel than people who have actually done the studies.
Myron! Myron!
What?
What are you doing? What you doing?
What you talking about? What am I doing?
You reading them nasty books again, right, Myron?
Everybody read those nasty books, man. You scared the hell out of me. What you talking about, man? Wait, I ain't did that in about 2 weeks.
You called yesterday 2 weeks. What you reading? What you reading?
You scared the goddamn book, man. Dr. EnQi. I went on Amazon and got 3 Dr. EnQi books because I'm reading about melatonin and biochemistry.
What is, Myron, that's not even first of all, it's not melatonin and whatever it is that you just said. It's melanin and biochemistry. You can't even pronounce the word, so how you reading? How you reading, Myron?
So this is where the research becomes important. And this is why I like that last article we went through, because the article has the trials, it has the studies, it has the results, then it has the redos. In case you don't know, the redos are the debunking attempts, right? So when you run some tests, regardless of whether you tested 10 subjects or 10,000, after you get some results, folks is going to redo those tests with different variables to see if your results hold up. So when the results hold up, now you take it to another level and you roll it out in different. So it has the results of different types of rollouts, right? Autistic children, 75% of the autistic children showed improvement from their symptoms. But then went even further and tested pregnant moms that already had autistic children and saw a drop, a drastic, from 20% to 5% is incredible. That's remarkable. Especially when you're talking about something that's, I'm just throwing $40, $50 out there because I know most people think vitamin D, they think pills, right? But it's much more beneficial to just go outside at lunchtime. It's much more beneficial to just go outside at lunchtime, and that's free, right? That's free. Go and take your butt outside at lunchtime, right? Get that UVB the natural way. Get that UVB. Convert that cholesterol, right? Get that UVB. Convert that cholesterol into the vitamin D family, right? Now let's go back and look at this another way. Let's look at this another way, right? Let's look at this another way. I want to show you this a whole nother way, right? Let's look at this from a whole different viewpoint. Let's look at this from a whole nother viewpoint. Look at this. So I want to show you a whole nother direction that vitamin D possibly impacts autistic outcomes, right? When we read the articles on the various types of estrogen, and it was positive correlation, 100%, tested, retested, positive correlation with progesterone, which is an estrogen precursor, and then the different forms of estrogen, right? Here's a completely different pathway, because what they're saying is vitamin D is impacting autism possibly through the regulation of, they said, 3% of your 26,000 genes, blah, blah, blah. Well, here's a whole nother pathology, a whole nother biochemical pathway where vitamin D might be impacting. See, and that's the thing with tests. And that's why what RFK is doing is important, because he's creating attention which can divert more resources. Because even when you find something that's working, you still have to try to nail down now all of the variables that could be like, why is it working? Is it because vitamin D is associated with the genes, right? Or is it because vitamin D is associated with vasopressin production through angiotensin, right? So is it vitamin D regulating the genes, or is it vitamin D regulating vasopressin, right? Or is it neither of those? Maybe it's neither of those, right? Maybe it's because vitamin D controls how your body metabolizes estrogen. This is why estrogen levels impact your bone health, right? We know vitamin D impacts your bone health, but usually only, premenopausal women discuss estrogen in terms of their bone health, because they're the only ones that really got to worry about it, right? But vitamin D controls estrogen metabolism. So maybe the estrogen exposure to the babies is because the vitamin D level is critical. I'm just saying. You see, we start to do the research and we start opening up these different conversations, right? Vitamin D has been shown to downregulate immune cells, the expression of aromatase, which converts testosterone to estrogen, leading to a decrease in estrogen levels. Right? Now, see, we can go deeper into that research. Right? Look, now we can read this. Let me show you how to do this. Let me show you how to do this for the folks like Daniel and some of the folks that are just genuinely curious. Let me show you how to do this. How you cross-reference findings to get more information, right? So now let's reread this real quick. Right? Let's reread this real quick. Vitamin D has been shown to downregulate in immune cells the expression of aromatase. Aromatase converts testosterone to estrogen, leading to a decrease in estrogen levels. So aromatase is something that turns your testosterone into estrogen. When you have low vitamin D levels, you have higher aromatase levels. Higher aromatase levels means you have higher estrogen levels. Got it? So now, if we want to refine our search, what we do is we just open up another window, right? Let's open up another window and type in aromatase and autism. Look at this. We're just going to type in aromatase and autism, and then bam. Male autism spectrum disorder is linked to brain aromatase ... You see how quick that is? See how quick that is? See how quick that is? So it's not a matter of conjecture. It's not a matter of politics. It really is a matter of just reading the numbers, getting to our whole, our Jay-Z, men lie, women lie, numbers don't, right? The numbers are what they are. We're spending too much time debating the numbers, right? We're spending too much time and energy debating the numbers when that energy, all that energy between the whole chat, Daniel consumed our whole video for 90 minutes. For 90 minutes, I'm talking to him. Everybody in the chat, he done bended. He's a mind bender. He done bent everybody's mind and attention to him. And the only thing we discussing is we getting loud. Even some of us starting to curse back at him and getting crazy, tearing up the algorithm for the video. Nobody gonna see this video because all them curses and all that. He done threatened my, talk about my children. YouTube ain't gonna promote this video after all that went into the chat, right? And all of that energy, we could have spent all that time talking about the solutions, right? Because there are more solutions, right? But the problem is there's such a wide spectrum of autism and there's such a wide spectrum of autism symptoms that it's not a matter of having a solution, right? Because they've done trials with oxytocin and had amazing results. Not 100% results. They had 30% results. They've done trials with vasopressin and had 40 to 60% results, right? 40% to 60% of the children had symptoms knocked out by vasopressin, by oxytocin treatments, right? They've done vitamin D tests, 75%. So it's not a matter of, okay, well, let me just grab some vitamin D and then I'm sure I'm straight. Nah, we need to learn as much as we can learn and then eliminate all those things, right? We saw that alcohol, like, is a #1 known inhibitor. Alcohol, right? What we talking about? Like, these are absolutely within our control, right? And as our lifestyles change and we get more into a synthetic space, more synthetic light, less vitamin D, more time indoors, less vitamin D, right? We're regressing. That was a large part of our spine conversation. We're regressing. We have a condition now called text neck because people's necks is like this. And as their neck, as they lose their posture, I was one of those kids. Let me tell you something. I was one of those kids in elementary school. Oh my God. The teacher had to tell me at least 5 times a day, stop leaning back in your chair. You're going to fall down and hurt your neck. Then when I'm sitting straight up in the chair, I was like, the teacher like, stop slouching in the chair, sit up straight. I was one of those kids. And I was so annoyed. I used to like, roll my eyes at the teacher, ignore it. Like, you just don't know. Like that teacher was loving you. Your teacher was loving on you. Your teacher was trying to tell you, listen, I'm already 40. I'm already 50. These posture issues are serious for me now. Because when we children, posture, like, who cares about posture? Somebody tell you posture, you might think pasta. You might think like spaghetti. You're not even posture. What? You get 40? Not 40. Like the other side of 45. When you get to the other side of 45, that's a different type of 40. There's different 40s. Let me just tell you that. There's different types of 40. There's 39, like this 30. When you get on the other side of 35, you like 40 at that time. Like 37, 38, 39, that's 40. Yeah, you 40. Right? But that's like the play 40. Like that's the play 40. Remember Jay-Z did the song Button Ups? What he said? The 40 is the new 20 or something. What he said with the button ups? That's the play 40. That's not the real 40. That's not the real. You just practicing being 40. You're not really 40 though. You're not 40 until you 45, 46, 48, right? That's when you're 40. That's when you've officially entered the drop dead zone. That's when you got to be on top of everything. Posture counts, how many steps you got a day. Because when you're in your 20s and 30s, how many steps you get a day is important. But you're not going to die immediately. Like your turnaround, your risk to reward, like it's far off. You're not worried about death. Unless you get like into a car accident or a random, you good. But once you get on the other side of 45, and it's not about now, you start regretting that you didn't have anybody in your life to help you with your posture, your posture when you was a child. So you could have got the benefits of having solid posture all the way up. Now, if you exercise, if you play sports, you never have to have the conversation as a child of posture. You're going to have good posture because you're going to have strong muscles, and your muscles are going to pull the tendons, and the tendons are going to keep the bones in proper alignment. You've got good posture. You never had a conversation about posture. You never walked with a book on your head. You're still good. But in this age, we have another epidemic that I'm sure Daniel would like to argue about. It's called video games. Video games is an epidemic. Oh, video games is an epidemic. Children that used to be ripping and running for 8 hours a day are now sitting on the couch for 8 hours a day after sitting in school for 8 hours a day. So they're sitting for 16 hours straight. They're already having advanced spine degeneration in their 20s. Because now gaming is such a thing that they're opening up schools and institutions and holding classes to be a gamer. That's now a career path. So now you got schools opening up so you can get a degree in gaming. They're not giving you an education in sitting down for 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day. Kids arguing, fighting with their parents. The parents got to literally unplug the video game system and wrap it up and take it into their bedroom to go to sleep, because they know even when they tell the children turn it off and they go back to their bedroom, the children are just going to turn it back on and put the volume down so they can keep on. Instead of playing actual basketball, they playing 2K. Instead of playing actual football, is Madden. As the games get realer and they put the backdrop to like little stories behind it, the children get to live vicariously as a basketball player in the game. They got the whole story in the game. Like, you a child in high school, you making decisions, you're getting drafted. Like, they get to have a whole synthetic experience as an athlete, but just in the game. And while it makes sense to make a quality game to make more money, on the flip side, your brain doesn't know the difference between visualization and actually doing a thing. Right? So that's another part of this autism conversation we didn't even have, right? We didn't even have this part of the conversation, right? We can go here, right? We can go here. Individuals with autism have difficulties in social learning domains, which typically involve mirror neuron system activation. Right? Most people have no idea what a mirror neuron is. They have no idea what a mirror neuron is. They out right now looking for chocolate, eggs, Easter bunny. But trust me, the mirror neuron system is absolutely activated with these games, especially the role-playing games where you get to see yourself in the character. And when they make the character with traits where the child gets to develop the traits, these are things to suck your child deeper into the game. It's not necessarily more about them having experiences, to suck them deeper into the game, right? They get to height, skin complexion, the way the eyes, so most children make the character look like them. Right? Then they get to take real money, turn it into fake money, and buy clothes and chains and jewelry for these characters in the video game. So now you get to see in your child's mind, who would your child like to be? If your child was given $1 million today, what would they look like? And you see what they're dressing, what the lingo, they get to create, they get to create who they would like to be in the fake world. So it takes away their drive and ambition to create that person in the real world, which is what you have to have. That's what you have to, when you're a child, you got to see something and aspire to be that and want to be that so much that you're willing to put in all the hard work, whether that means studying, doing extra homework and whatever, or, double workouts or whatever, if this is physical, mental and intellectual, like whatever the pursuit is, you got to be willing to make the sacrifices to. But if the child can vicariously squash all those ambitions synthetically at 10, 12 years old, they don't aspire to be anything but a gamer or the next best thing to a gamer, which is an influencer.